Chapter II of the surprising adventures of Bampfylde Moore Carew, King of the Beggars, by Bampfylde Moore Carew. This recording is in the public domain. We are now entering into the busy part of our hero's life, where we shall find him acting in various characters, and performing all with propriety, dignity, and decorum. We shall therefore rather choose to account for some of the actions of our hero, by desiring the reader to keep in mind the principles of the government of the mendicants, which are, like those of the Algerines and other states of Barbary, in a perpetual state of hostility with most other people, so that whatsoever stratagems or deceits they can overreach them by, are not only allowed by their laws, but considered as commendable and praiseworthy. And as the Algerines are looked upon as a very honest people by those who are in alliance with them, though they plunder the rest of mankind, and as most other governments have thought that they might very honestly attack any weak neighbouring state, whenever it was convenient for them, and murder 40 or 50,000 of the human species, we hope, to the unprejudiced eye of reason, the government of the gipsies in general, and our hero as a member of it, will not appear in so disadvantageous a light, for exercising a few stratagems to overreach their enemies, especially when it is considered they never, like other states, do any harm to the persons of their enemies, and nothing considerable to their fortunes. Our hero being again admitted at the first general assembly of the gipsies, and having taken the proper oaths of allegiance to the sovereign, was soon after sent out by him on a cruise upon their enemies. Our hero's wit was now set to work, by what stratagems he might best succeed. The first that occurred to his thoughts was that of equipping himself with an old pair of trousers, enough of a jacket to cover his nakedness, stockings such as nature gave, shoes, or rather the body of shoes, for soles they had none, which had leaks enough to sink a first-class man of war, and a woollen cap so black that one might more safely swear it had not been washed since Noah's flood, than any electors can that they receive no bribes. Being thus attired, our hero changed his manners with his dress. He forgot entirely his family, education, and politeness, and became neither more nor less than an unfortunate shipwrecked seaman. Here, if we may be allowed to compare great things with small, we could wish that all orders of men were strict imitators of our hero. We mean that they would put on the characteristics and qualifications of their employment at the time they invest themselves with the ensigns of it; that the divine, when he puts on his sacred and venerable habit, would clothe himself with piety, goodness, gentleness, long-suffering, charity, temperance, contempt of filthy lucre, and other godlike qualifications of his office; that the judge, at the time he puts on his ermined robes, would put on righteousness and equity as an upper garment, with an integrity of mind more white and spotless than the fairest ermine; that the grave physician, when he puts on his large periwig, would put under it the knowledge of the human frame, of the virtues and effects of his medicines, of the signs and nature of diseases, with the most approved and experienced forms of cure; that the mechanic, when he puts on his leather or woolen apron, put on diligence, frugality, temperance, modesty, and good nature; and that kings themselves, when the crown, which is adorned with pearls and many precious stones, is put on their heads, would put on at the same time the more inestimable gems of all the precious virtues, that they would remember at times they were invested with the dalmatica at their coronation only as an emblem of the ornament of a good life and holy actions; that the rod they received was the rod of virtue and equity, to encourage and make much of the godly, and to terrify the wicked, to show the way to those that go astray, and to offer the hand to those that fall, to repress the proud and to lift up the lowly; and the sword they were girt with was to protect the liberties of their people, to defend and help widows and orphans, restore the things which have gone to decay, maintain those which are restored, and confirm things that are in good order. As to our hero, he so fully put on the character of a shipwrecked seaman, that in his first excursion he gained a very considerable booty, having likewise ingeniously imitated the passes and certificates that were necessary for him to travel with unmolested. After about a month's travel, he accidentally, at Kingsbridge, in Devonshire, met with Coleman, his late schoolfellow, one of those who entered with him into the community, as before related, but had, after a year and a half's sojourn, left them and returned to his friends. However, not finding that satisfaction among them as with the gipsies, he had again joined that people. Great was the joy, therefore, of these two friends at their meeting, and they soon agreed to travel together for some time, and accordingly proceeded to Totnes, from thence to the city of Exeter, where they raised a contribution in one day amounting to several pounds. Having obtained all he could desire from this stratagem, his fruitful invention soon hinted another. He now became the plain honest country farmer, who, living in the Isle of Sheppey in Kent, had the misfortune to have his grounds overflowed, and all his cattle drowned. His habit was now neat but rustic, his air and behaviour simple and inoffensive, his speech in the Kentish dialect, his countenance dejected, his tale pitiful, wondrous pitiful, a wife and 7 helpless infants being partakers of his misfortunes. So that if his former stratagem answered his wishes, this did still more so, he now getting seldom less than a guinea a day. Having raised a considerable booty by these 2 stratagems, he made the best of his way towards Strayton, in Devonshire, where was soon to be held a general meeting of the gipsies. Here he was received with great applause, on account of the successful stratagems he had executed, and he had an honourable mark of distinction bestowed upon him, being seated near the king. Though our hero, by means of these stratagems, abounded with all the pleasures he could desire, yet he began now to reflect with himself on that grand and noble maxim of life, that we are not born for ourselves only, but indebted to all mankind, to be of as great use and service to them as our capacities and abilities will enable us to be. He therefore gave a handsome gratuity to a famous rat catcher, who assumed the honour of being rat catcher to the king, to be initiated into that, and the still more useful secret of curing madness in dogs or cattle. Our hero, by his close application, soon attained so considerable a knowledge in his profession, that he practised with much success and applause, to the great advantage of the public in general, not confining the good effects of his knowledge to his own community only, but extending them universally to all sorts of people, wheresoever they were wanted. For though we have before observed that the mendicants are in a constant state of hostility with all other people, and Mr. Carew was as alert as any one in laying all manner of schemes and stratagems to carry off a booty from them, yet he thought, as a member of the grand society of humankind, he was obliged to do them all the good in his power, when it was not opposite to the interest of that particular community of which he was a member. Mr. Carew's invention being never at a loss, he now formed a new stratagem, to execute which he exchanged his habit, shirt, etc., for only an old blanket, shoes, and stockings he laid aside, because they did not suit his present purpose. Being thus accoutred, or rather unaccoutred, he was now no more than poor mad Tom, whom the foul fiend had led through fire and through flame, through ford and whirlpool, over bog and quagmire, that hath laid knives under his pillow, and halters in his pew, set ratsbane by his porridge, made him proud at heart to ride on a bay trotting horse over 4-inch bridges, to curse his own shadow for a traitor, who eats the swimming frog, the toad, the tadpole, the wall-newt, and the water-newt, that in the fury of his heart, when the foul fiend rages, swallows the old rat and ditch dog, drinks the green mantle off the standing pool, and mice and rats, and such small gear, have been Tom's food for 7 long year. O do de do de do day. Bless thee from whirlwind, star blasting and taking. Do poor Tom some charity whom the foul fiend vexes. There could I have him now, and there again, and there. Though the sharp hawthorn blows the cold wind, Tom's a cold, who gives any thing to poor Tom. In this character, and with such like expressions, our hero entered the house both of great and small, claiming kindred to them, and committing all manner of frantic actions, such as beating himself, offering to eat coals of fire, running against the wall, and tearing to pieces those garments which were given him to cover his nakedness, by which means he raised very considerable contributions. But these different habits and characters were still of farther use to our hero, for by their means he had a better opportunity of seeing the world and knowing mankind than most of our youths who make the grand tour; for as he had none of those petty amusements and raree shows which so much divert our young gentlemen abroad, to engage his attention, it was wholly applied to the study of mankind, their various passions and inclinations, and he made the greater improvement in his study, as in many of his characters they acted before him without reserve or disguise. He saw in little and plain houses hospitality, charity, and compassion, the children of frugality, and found under gilded and spacious roofs littleness, uncharitableness, and inhumanity, the offspring of luxury and riot. He saw servants waste their master's substance, and that there were no greater nor more crafty thieves than domestic ones, and met with masters who roared out for liberty abroad, acting the arbitrary tyrants in their own houses. He saw ignorance and passion exercise the rod of justice, oppression the handmaid of power, self-interest outweighing friendship and honesty in the opposite scale, pride and envy spurning and trampling on what was more worthy than themselves. He saw the pure white robes of truth sullied with the black hue of hypocrisy and dissimulation. He sometimes too met much riches unattended by pomp and pride, but diffusing themselves in numberless unexhausted streams, conducted by the hands of two lovely servants, goodness and beneficence. And he saw honesty, integrity, and goodness of mind, inhabitants of the humble cot of poverty. All these observations afforded him no little pleasure, but he felt a much greater in the indulgence of the emotions of filial piety, paying his parents frequent visits, unknown to them, in different disguises, at which time the tenderness he saw them express in their inquiries after him, it being their constant custom so to do of all travellers, always melted him into real tears. It has been remarked that curiosity, or the desire of knowledge, is that which most distinguishes man from the brute, and the greater the mind is, the more insatiable is that passion. We may, without flattery, say no man had a more boundless one than our hero, for not satisfied with the observations he had made in England and Wales, which we are well assured were many more than are usually made by gentlemen before they travel into foreign parts, he now resolved to see other countries and manners. He was the more inclined to this, as he imagined it would enable him to be of greater service to the community of which he was a member, by rendering him capable of executing some of his stratagems with much greater success. He communicated this design to his schoolfellow Escott, one of those who joined the gipsies with him, for neither of the four wholly quitted the community. Escott very readily agreed to accompany him in his travels, and there being a vessel ready to sail for Newfoundland, tying at Dartmouth, where they then were, they agreed to embark on board her. Nothing remarkable happened in their passage which relates to our hero. We shall therefore pass it by, and land him safe in Newfoundland. Having remained there during the fishing season, he acquired all the information he possibly could, and which he thought might be useful to him, and returned in the same vessel to Dartmouth, from whence he had at first sailed, bringing with him a surprising, fierce, and large dog, which he had enticed to follow him, and made as gentle as a lamb, by an art peculiar to himself. Our hero was received with great joy by his fellow gipsies, and they were loud in his praises when they understood he had undertaken this voyage to enable him to deceive his enemies with the greater success. He accordingly, in a few days, went out on a cruise in the character of a shipwrecked sailor, lost in a vessel homeward bound from Newfoundland, sometimes belonging to Poole, sometimes to Dartmouth, at other times to other ports, and under such or such commander, according as the newspapers gave account of such melancholy accidents. If the booty he got before under this character was considerable, it was much more so now, for being able to give an exact account of Newfoundland, the settlements, harbours, fishery, and the inhabitants thereof, he applied with great confidence to masters of vessels, and gentlemen well acquainted with those parts, so that those to whom before his prudence would not let him apply, now became his greatest benefactors, as the perfect account he gave of the country engaged them to give credit to all he asserted, and made them very liberal in his favour. Chapter 3.